This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
The United States apparently does not show seriousness in the diplomatic process.
The outcome of these talks will be incredibly consequential.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
Can we talk? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Webster. That's the global question of the hour. U.S. negotiators heading to Pakistan for peace talks with Iranian negotiators who, at least publicly, haven't actually committed to talking with the U.S. The Strait of Hormuz remains the focal point of the conflict, evidenced by this weekend's U.S. Navy enforcement of its blockade as an Iranian cargo ship tried to breach it.
Motor vessel Tosca, vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
U.S. forces boarded and confiscated the ship, which apparently contained missile fuel components. A spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry.
We witnessed that the United States insisted on bad faith and violation of the ceasefire. All of this is evidence that the United States apparently does not show seriousness in the diplomatic process.
U.S. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz on ABC this weekend.
I think the outcome of these talks will be incredibly consequential, and as the president has stated, he is prepared to escalate, to de-escalate, to actually board and turn around Iranian ships.
Feared IRGC Commander Ahmad Vahidi appears to be in charge in Iran right now. Retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General John Tykert tells Fox News.
His resume is as bad as it gets. It's as bad as Soleimani's. I don't think, though, that he has the wasta or the pull that Soleimani had. I think that if negotiations don't play out well for them or for us tomorrow, that he should be at the top of the target list.
Vahidi is known to have masterminded terrorist attacks around the globe. The Middle East conflict and closure of the Strait of Hormuz has left European jet fuel supplies in dire straits.
When a plane leaves the United States, they can't take jet fuel with them. The administration's been saying, we have plenty in the U.S. Great, but if you leave the U.S. and there's no jet fuel on the other side. So what happens is the fuel surcharges that Americans are going to see, that are already starting to see, and ahead of Memorial Day in the summer, tickets are going to be very expensive.
Former White House advisor Amos Hochstein on CBS's Face the Nation. On the plus side, a drop in U.S. gas prices of late. AAA says the national per-gallon average is now back down to $4.04 in New York, $4.11, Pennsylvania, $4.09. Disbelief in Shreveport, Louisiana, after police there say a shooting spree arose from a domestic violence incident that saw a man gun down 7 of his own children, along with an 8th not his own. Shreveport Councilwoman Tabitha Taylor.
I don't know what people think in the crevices of their mind to want to harm another human being, let alone that of children.
Police eventually shot the gunman dead after a car chase. The Trump administration's tariff refund system went live today. American importers able to access a portal used to issue refunds from the $166 billion paid by companies. The Supreme Court struck down those tariffs in February after ruling President Trump illegally sidestepped Congress when he enacted them. A fiery day in the UK. First came British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's apology for appointing Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the U.S., despite ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
I should not have appointed Peter Mandelson. I take responsibility for that decision, and I apologize again to the victims of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Then came fireworks as a member of Parliament called Starmer out and got chastised for it.
The Prime Minister is a barefaced liar, and if you had any decency left...
No, order, sit and leave. Leave now. I'll name you otherwise and go now if I were you.
The member who called Starmer a liar has been suspended. Back in our country, a case that could impact religious freedom nationwide. The Supreme Court has agreed to take up a case involving whether or not Catholic preschools in Colorado must accept children from so-called same-sex couples in order to receive state funding.
A state law allowing public and private schools to take part in a universal preschool program includes a non-discrimination provision. The Archdiocese of Denver argues that rule is at odds with its religious rights. In 1990, the Supreme Court ruled if a law applies equally to everyone, the religious exemptions are not required. Arguments in the case are expected to be heard this fall. In Denver, I'm Keenan Dixon.
And big day in Beantown. Today was Marathon Day in Boston with a familiar name taking the tape.
Bingwa is the word for champion in Swahili. 201. John Career, 201.52. Bingwa, Boston Marathon champion in 2026. Back to back.
The call on ESPN, John Career, the men's winner. Fellow Kenyan Sharon Lokedi, the defending women's winner, also repeated as champ with a time of 2:18.51. Still to come here on the 5 o'clock report, a recap of our top regional stories and highlights from today's Issues in Education. Now checking the stories making news where you live across New York and Pennsylvania. It doesn't appear the New York State budget will be finalized anytime soon. Governor Kathy Hochul asked what appears to be the big holdup between her and state lawmakers at this point.
I've been hoping we'd be done since April 1st, but I'm not walking back from, I believe, the priorities that New Yorkers deserve to have. The majority of them focused on affordability.
Proposals on auto insurance liability limits and immigration and ICE-related proposals are parts she says she's determined to get past. The Empire State's been scraping by on stopgap funding since April 1st. Hochul's rival, Republican gubernatorial candidate Bruce Blakeman, campaigning in Corning over the weekend, blasting Hochul's climate change agenda.
We can have green energy, but we need natural gas. We need to look at nuclear and hydro and all the other energy sources. And you know what? If you create competition, it's going to drive the rates down.
Blakeman says Democrats' green energy plans are a scam.
They want to ruin our beautiful farmland here in this state. They want to put windmills out in the ocean. It's the most expensive form of energy. It produces very little energy.
The Nassau County executive has closed the polling gap some with Hochul in recent weeks. Two of the top 5 worst states when it comes to tick-borne illnesses are New York and PA. John Messina of Canandaigua, New York knows well. He caught Lyme disease 11 years ago from a tick bite, recently telling Family Life News about his decade-plus ordeal with that debilitating disease.
It's affected everything in my body, muscles, joints, my brain, to the point where I would be in Canandaigua, come to a stoplight and not know where I was at. I fight night sweats. I have issues at times where I can't breathe. It affects my heart. I live with stabbing pain in my heart.
You can hear more of that conversation by checking out the podcast version of today's Noon Report with Bob Price at familylife.org or wherever you get your podcast. There is an antibiotic that's effective at treating Lyme disease, but it must be administered soon after infection. The long arm of the law catches up to a former Pennsylvania mayor.
Place your hands behind your back. There you go. You got anything on you?
A warrant for Pennsylvania.
A warrant for what?
Pennsylvania has issued a warrant for you.
Texas authorities arresting Chad Allen Carr, the former Democratic mayor of Gettysburg, PA, and former president of Gettysburg's so-called Pride organization, arrested again on additional child abuse charges. This arrest came in Texas after he left PA following his initial arrest. Authorities will now extradite him back to Pennsylvania to face charges there. Several students suffering minor injuries last week when a wild turkey flew through the windshield of a school bus in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Here's Family Life's Bob Price.
Yeah, Mark, this bizarre incident happened as the bus was leaving the Conema Township Elementary School last Friday. That vehicle was traveling south on Route 219 when the wild turkey flew into its path, breaking through the windshield and landing in the front seat where students were sitting. Several children were cut and scraped by the shattered glass. The turkey did not survive. Bob Price, Family Life News.
Thanks, Bob. Up next, we stay with Bob for highlights from today's Issues in Education as he and Dr. Ralph Kerr of the Teaching and Learning Institute in Houghton, New York, begin with an important deadline today.
Today, April 20th, is the deadline for New York school board candidates to get those petitions in. Those who are running know what I'm talking about. Explain, Ralph, if you would, what this process is like and why it is a requirement for anybody interested in serving on a school board to file these petitions.
Well, first of all, it's a state law, so the dates are all set in legislation. If one is interested in running, they should be already have a whole bunch of petitions that are signed, and the district office can certainly tell you how many signatures are required. Then you need to, as you're getting the signatures, I hope you've been talking to residents about what their concerns or their joys may be about the school. Then that really makes one a viable candidate, and you get your name on the ballot. And let me just say to anybody that is a candidate, you should be prepared to explain to people why you're running. And I would say also that the Teaching and Learning Institute is available to help candidates. If you have general questions about being a candidate, be in touch with us and we'll be happy to try to help you with that. And then the most important thing is vote.
Amen. And typically, a lot of districts will host a Meet the Candidates night in advance of the school budget vote, which is coming up May 19th, when you also vote on those school board candidates. So that's another way to get your message out. And we mentioned that school budget vote. It is fast approaching, Ralph, Tuesday, May 19th, just a month away from now. Hard to believe it's already here. But many districts don't know what they'll be getting from the state because the state still doesn't have a budget in place. How do schools compensate for this uncertainty?
Well, isn't it ironic that the state has a deadline for passing the budget, but they didn't do it? They haven't done it for several years. Instead, they just pass an extender, which gets them to continue to move on as they are. It's interesting, though, the schools don't have the option of passing an extender, so they are required to put together a budget that would be voted on May 19th. It's really a guess expenditure at this time in terms of you just look at it and figure out, okay, the governor says she's going to give 1% increase. The Senate and the Assembly have said they're going to give 2%. So you can count on probably at the most maybe 3%, maybe 2 or 1. Who knows?
It is a guessing game, isn't it?
It is. How do you put together a budget when you don't know what your major source of revenue, how much that's going to be? So it's just a pathetic situation that we're in once again in the state of New York.
Yeah, they've passed 3 budget extenders. Who knows how many they're going to do this year? It's an election year after all, so districts are really sitting on pins and needles for sure. Well, let's head to Pennsylvania because we don't want to leave them out. PA lawmakers, Ralph, propose a cut to funding state education improvement tax credits. This is a program that's helped over 500,000 Pennsylvania children attend private school the past 25 years. Should they be cutting these school choice scholarships, Ralph Kerr?
Well, this is a really interesting situation because it's viewed by those that are against this legislation as just another way to give people school choice options. And under the program, businesses can actually divert 90% of their taxes to a nonprofit educational institution of their choosing. It has been very successful in the state. It's certainly a competition for the public schools. There are a couple things that do concern me about it. There apparently is lack of accountability about how this money is actually spent. And then there's a concern also there may not be as much academic transparency in what's actually being taught in these educational institutions that are getting this money that otherwise would be going to the public schools. So in summary, I would say I've never been afraid of competition for the public schools because if you don't have a good public school, then people should have a choice. My experience is that if you have a good public school, people will send their children there, and it's a great mission field for not only the children, but the teachers as well.
Thanks, guys. You can hear the entire feature and all of our Family Life original news features at Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and, of course, FamilyLife.org. This is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
When you think about evangelism, you may not picture your office, job site, or storefront, but Scripture does. Hi, I'm Rob West with your Faith and Finance Minute. In 1 Thessalonians 4:11 and 12, Paul urges believers to work with your hands so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders. In other words, your work itself can be a witness. Witnessing at work doesn't mean forcing a gospel presentation into every conversation. It means showing up with integrity, excellence, humility, and grace. It means treating clients fairly, honoring commitments, and putting people above profit. Do you remember that several of Jesus' disciples were tradesmen, and the Apostle Paul made tents in the marketplace? God has placed you exactly where He wants you, so live out your faith at work. Connect with a certified Kingdom advisor who's been trained to deliver financial advice that aligns with your Christian values by visiting our website, faithfi.com.
Thanks, Rob. Finally at 5, highway workers have to deal with a lot of stuff, but when a truck crashed on I-40 in Knoxville, Tennessee Friday, state DOT workers were outnumbered by about 1 million. That truck was carrying about 1 million bees who escaped and swarmed the area. Mark Nagy is with Tennessee DOT.
If you're going to be dealing with a swarm of possibly 1 million bees, it would help to be a beekeeper and to have one of those suits. So our crews, our guys were making sure that they were as safe as they can be.
Safe as they can be. Extra credit for a honey of a pun there, sir. Traffic was backed up for miles for hours while beekeepers were summoned to the scene for what was a major buzzkill, at least for the bees. And that's the world we live in for Monday, April 20th, 2026. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.